Hi, my name is Tom Young, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the score sheets for the Green 330 GTC. Since I got back from Cavallino, I had a chance to look over the score sheet that the chief class judge sent us to look over Chaz's car, his that Green GTC that we spent the last year putting back together, or at least improving to get to Cavallino. You know, as you know, if you follow this channel, that we missed getting a platinum, and it looks like we missed by it like a point or a point and a half. And you know, I'm gonna admit that I'm a little disappointed, and I kind of took the last video that I shot about it. It was just kind of like saying, okay, well, it is what it is. I mean, I always tell people that you're never going to make, you know, a judge reverses call, just like you can't make an umpire, you know, reverses call in a baseball game. But you kind of ask yourself, well, why does the manager run out onto the field and kick dirt on the umpire's shoes when he disagrees with a call? And sometimes it's a game, because it's the reason why the manager does that is to basically put the umpire on notice and say, look, I'm looking at what you're doing and I'm watching your calls, and if I dispute it, maybe the next time you make a call, you might reconsider how you judge or make a call at the plate. And for me, going over the score sheet allows me to get an idea of what was wrong with the car, or at least what these judges think, and but also just compare it a little bit to how this car is judged, or whether it's being judged, you know, accordingly. Also, as we're reviewing these score sheets, stick around to the end, because I have a pretty funny story about scoring and judging, and sometimes gives you a funny perspective about judging and how people can get upset about certain things. Look, I think that the job of the judges is not an easy job. It's a volunteer job. You know, you work pretty hard from 7 o'clock in the morning until you know, at least 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then if you're doing your judging correctly, you should be working, you know, days and days before the show, over the course of time as you get your judging assignment, and you should be able to know what cars you're going to judge. You should obviously also be knowledgeable about the car that, you know, the class that you're judging, and do a little bit of homework about what is correct or incorrect in these cars. I mean, we rely on the judges to know as much about these cars as we should know as restorers and owners when we're showing these cars. So it's kind of like a two-way street. But I've also heard a lot of judges grumble sometimes about saying, oh, you know, this is a lot of work, and you know, they don't pay me enough to do this because it's a volunteer job and they're doing this all for free. Or maybe they're getting free tickets to the show, or they're getting some kind of fringe benefits, but, you know, for all intents and purposes, they really don't get paid for doing this. So I get it. I get that the judges work really hard to do it, and it is sometimes a thankless job. But I'd also like to remind the judges that in order for this whole process to work, you rely on owners and restorers to bring cars to the show. So you may feel like you're busting your butt to judge these cars, and you're facing a lot of people that are negative about what you're doing, and, you know, saying, why did you take points for this, and you have to answer to all those. But I also say, these guys who enter these cars and do pay all this money to not only enter the car, to ship the car, to fix the car, to restore the car, to buy all the parts that are missing and search the world over, it is a long process. And the perception of having an owner show up and a judge takes 15 minutes to judge a car, and that can make or break all the work and expense of bringing a car to a show like Cavallino. So it's good for me to provide a perspective on both sides. I mean, I try my best to explain to my clients about the process of showing. And as we said before, you know, the owner of this green car had shown it twice before, and the first score that he got, I think, was a 90.5 point car with notes on it what was wrong, with 97 being a platinum. So he took the car home and score sheet fixed all the things and brought it back, And the second time he scored, I think he scored like an 84 or 85 on the second time around. And the disappointment and maybe even disgust is that, what the hell? I mean, I had a 90.5 car the first time. I take it back and it does worse even after fixing all those things. And I think that's when he basically decided to give me a call and say, can you help me, or at least explain what's going on? And I explained to the owner, I said, look, the things with these cars is that the judge's job is not necessarily to tell you everything that's wrong with the car. Their job is just to tell you what they see is wrong with the car and score it accordingly in the 15 minutes that they have. So let's say a car is completely wrong. I mean, everything's wrong on it. They could do 200 points deductions off of a car, but once they drop below, let's say 85 points or something, they just stop counting. They only have 15 minutes to go over the car, so it's not like they can go every single detail in the car and make a list and then give a roadmap to the customer and say, or to the exhibitor, these are the things that are wrong with the car. If you correct it, then it'll be a 100-point car. There's no such thing. What they do is they show the things that would deduct you enough so that you would fall off of a platinum car. If you're going to an FCA show, then you would fall off of, let's say, second and third place. But at Cavallino, there's only really first place or platinum, 97 points or better. So in defense of the judges, I told the owner that that's what happened with his car. In a video when I was first introduced to the car, I went over quite a few things that were wrong and maybe even missed by the previous judges, where I said, well, this is wrong, this is wrong. We're very lucky with GTCs. We have a guidebook, as-built manual for a 330 GTC that was generously created by Cleet Gardenauer and several people, including myself, who contributed to this book that basically took a few years to put together, that goes over almost every detail on a 330 GTC, in which if you follow it, you can come pretty close to making a show car. However, some people use that as a guide, some people don't, and in defense of the judges, I feel like they have to have that in kind of total recall as they're going over a car. So it's tough for a judge's point of view. But then the other side, from the owner's point of view, it's like we study that manual, even for a restorer, study that manual and try our best to make everything as possibly correct. So as I went over that car the first time, we went over a lot of things, and then what I did was I put together the cost and the benefits of fixing some things. I mean, there were certain things on this car that I've talked about several times where I just felt it wasn't worth fixing for the points return. So it's kind of like your return on investment. We talked about the door fit. We've talked about the deductions. I actually used the previous score sheets to say, hey, listen, they deducted this amount for the door fit. If we can make everything else correct on this car, we have a really good chance of winning, because the last two runs, when you look at the score sheets, the first and second score sheets as a guide, the maximum deduction they took off for the door fit was 1 point, and another time they took off half a point without having done anything. So in my analysis of the previous score sheets, I wanted to tell my client, look, to fix this point, what points are we going to fix? If they deducted 1 point or a half a point previously for this door fit, I'll take the hit for 1, or I'll take a hit for a half a point, because it's not worth repainting the car. I mean, re-engineering that door so it closes correctly to their satisfaction, that we wouldn't get 1 point, would the cost of it, I felt, was just way out of reason to do a car. There were other things that were certainly not cheap, re-chroming the rear bumpers, or doing the things that we had done on this car, or putting new side glass because of the scratches. Those were not inexpensive, but I felt like those were worth more, having, not that they deducted before, but I definitely felt that had potentials for deductions. So I advised the client to just, let's fix all these other things that I know that we would probably get deducted for another judge. Maybe not the ones in the previous times, but I felt like if I were judging this car, this is where I would deduct. Perhaps it was subjective, but judging is ultimately subjective. Some judges are more critical of some things to others. But what was interesting was when I got the new score sheet, the one that was judging my work, I was absolutely surprised that I found 2.5 points deducted for the same category in which the past I was deducted 1 point, or my owner was deducted half a point or 1 point. Now I know we're splitting hairs, but that discrepancy between a maximum 1 point or a maximum of 2.5 points definitely hurt us in trying to achieve a platinum on this car. There was another one that I was questioning and didn't understand why they deducted for it. We had put a brand new interior in his car. We replaced the carpeting, we had fixed the door sill issues, a lot of little details that we fixed, and put a brand new interior, new leather, new everything. And yet for some reason they took half a point off because they felt that the interior was not up to standard. To us, we were just like, what the heck are they talking about? You know, how do you take a half a point off of a new interior? Where was it that they had a problem? So right off the bat, you know, without sounding like any other way, because I think when you contest a score sheet, people are always going to look at like you've got sour grapes, and that's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is try to get to the bottom of why people deducted and whether it was fair or not. You know, I'm willing to accept our 95.5 point car and say, look, we missed it by 1.5 points. But at the same time, I question, you know, how they got to that 95.5 on our car after doing all these things. You know, certainly a lot more than just the worst 15-point deduction for one of the score sheets. I mean, we gained back dozens of points on this car. And so it was a little frustrating to look at these deductions. So I reached out to the chief judge. The owner of the car reached out to the chief class judge and asked issues about the interior, and didn't really get a straight answer as to why. I think it's one of those things that, you know, I hate to say this, but sometimes judges just deduct because they feel like they need to deduct something. And I don't want to point the finger at people, but it's like I just didn't understand where. I mean, if you could show me, if I could have known that they were going to take a half a point for interior while they were doing it and say, well, show me what the problem is, because I don't see any problem. It's a new interior. But for whatever reason, they just said sorry, just did that. He did not contest the 2.5 point deduction. So what I did was I reached out to the chief judge and had a conversation and said, look, just so you know, these are the things that I have a problem with. And I'm not trying to, you know, get a platinum post-show and say, give me a platinum because I deserve it because these guys were wrong. I respectfully showed the discrepancies, and the reply that I got was that perhaps the previous two sheets were too lenient about the deduction. And the one that you got on this last one was probably more correct to what was deserved. You know, that's fair, you know, if he wants to say that that's the reason. But my complaint is consistency. What I really have a problem with judges is that they need to be consistent. Because if you can't be consistent, then how do you expect us to play with rules that are constantly moving? That you know, you're scoring differently from one year to the next depending on who's scoring. You know, the whole reason why we have a guide like that was created, and honestly, I know for a fact that the GTC guide that was created was because of these discrepancies, because the owner who showed his GTC felt that it was unfair because he had the same issues. He shows his car once, he does really well. The next time he doesn't even score close to what he did the last time. And out of frustration, and perhaps frustration is what we benefited from, was that he created a guide for GTCs to say, look, if we're going to talk about consistency, let's make a guidebook for everyone to follow. And so showing a GTC should be relatively easier than showing another car that doesn't have a guidebook. But yet the deductions are still, you know, they're just, the discrepancies in the judging scoring still hasn't been taken care of. One of the things that I brought up to the chief judge was, you understand that I took those two first score sheets as a guide to understand what they were deducting for, and then based my repairs on that score sheet. Now, I tell people all the time, don't restore or fix a car based on the score sheet. Like I said before, they stopped counting at 85. But to my point, is I did use the score sheet to understand what they deducted for, and they did specifically say that they deducted 1 point or half a point because of the door fit. So my feeling is having two score sheets that deducted at a maximum of a 1 point should not have shown up as a 2.5 point deduction by a new set of judges that decided that they wanted to do it that way, never looking at the previous score sheets. Yes, okay, they're maybe scoring correctly, but I still don't think that that's fair with the consistency, because what they ultimately do is they discourage people from showing if they can't be consistent in their judging. You know, it just really comes down to that. And okay, call it and tell me that, you know, I'm angry and I want, but at the same time, I wanted to point out that this is why judges need to look at previous scores and understand they can't just show up to a show, not look at what they judged earlier. And you know, I'm going to tell you the truth. Some of these judges that judged our sheet were on the previous scoring for the previous times. So, you know, it's not like they didn't know what somebody else's work. This was their work. So I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just pointing out that there's discrepancies, even if it's the same judges judging. And unless that's showing up because you know, there'll be some reason why they didn't look at it, or they were too busy, or they didn't review it. But I just think that as much as I defend the job of the judges to my clients, I think the judges need to step up a little bit more. So I'd be curious to what you guys think. I know this is something that people are just like, boy, this is just splitting hairs. This is why I don't judge. But it's also interesting to hear your comments, simply because they are actually owners and people who are thinking about showing their cars at a level of Ferraris. So it does count, and people are watching, and judges and owners and organizations are looking at these videos and seeing a side of how difficult it is to show and I try to be as objective as possible. But so I'd be curious to see what other people think. I know it's not something that everybody wants to do. So a lot of people won't do it. But I think also, if we're going to continue having cars judged like this with the Ferrari's rules that had been established many years ago, then they need to consider this issue with consistency. I don't know if you'll ever solve it, but if it takes away from the ability for people to be as objective as possible, then I think you're going to lose participants. You're going to lose entrants, because there are plenty of other shows these days. I watch the show field change. A lot of these car shows are turning into lifestyle events. Cavallino, for that matter, is doing the same thing. They're celebrating more about the bringing of the cars. It's more like a fun event to get together with. And oh, by the way, they also judge these cars. But if people get frustrated and don't want to get their cars judged, you're not going to survive, because no one's going to want to use these. You know, no one's going to care. They're just going to want to show up and have a car and be celebrated and be happy. I don't want participation awards. I think that if you're going to show a car at a high level, you definitely should be able to prove that your car is worthy of it. But if you can't do it with consistency, I don't know how you're going to validate what it is that we're all doing. But anyway, I hope you found this video interesting. I'm always willing to listen to comments about people who are thinking about showing, why they don't show, why they want to show, and you know, maybe we can make some change. So just to put all this stuff in perspective, I wanted to tell this funny story that I had heard from Francois, my mentor, when he was showing a car many years ago. I'm putting on yellow paint marks on the steering knuckle for this Ferrari that I'm prepping for a concours. It always reminds me of a story that I had heard about my mentor, Francois Sicard, when he was showing a car at a show. And there was a young judge that was trying to show that he knew a lot about Ferraris and all this other stuff. And, you know, the three judges, he was kind of saying something, and Francois had overheard something about, you know, the yellow paint. And he kind of stuck himself inside that group and said, what's the problem? And the young judge was saying, oh, well, you know, I was having a discussion with my fellow judges here about whether or not that yellow paint is correct color for the marks on the steering column. And Francois kind of looked at him and says, who are you? What do you know? all of a sudden there's silence on the show field. Did you work at the factory? Because I worked at the factory. You know what we did when we ran out of yellow paint? We sent a kid to the store to go buy more yellow paint. So what the fuck do you know about yellow paint? Needless to say, that kind of put a damper on the whole judging of that car. But at the same time, Francois was absolutely right. Sometimes you have to think about what you know and what some people actually did back in the day. And that's my yellow paint story.